It was the kind of night Julia and Michael had grown painfully familiar with. Quiet, heavy, and full of invisible weight. The wind outside their small home in the suburbs of Oregon whispered softly through the trees. But inside, the stillness was almost suffocating. The dim glow of a nursery nightlight painted soft shadows across the room where their 6-month-old daughter, Emma, lay asleep in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell gently with each breath, but her legs, still unmoving, told a different story. Emma had been paralyzed for nearly 3 months. It began with subtle signs Julia couldn't explain. First, she thought, maybe Emma was just having an off day. But the days turned into weeks. Tests turned into appointments. Appointments turned into diagnosis. And eventually a devastating truth settled over their lives like a heavy blanket. Their once lively baby girl was now trapped in a body that refused to move. Despite every consultation, every scan, every whispered prayer, doctors offered no answers, no cure, no timeline, just uncertainty. That night, as Emma slept, the softest sound in the room came from Rex, their 3-month-old German shepherd puppy. He lay curled at the foot of Emma's crib, his large ears twitching. With every creak and sigh the old house gave. He was usually a ball of energy, curious, clumsy, bounding from room to room. But tonight, like so many nights before, Rex was still focused. His eyes stayed on Emma, unwavering, as if he knew something that Julia and Michael could not. In the living room, Julia sat, huddled beneath a faded quilt once used to swaddle Emma before the diagnosis. Her eyes were glassy, lost in thought. Beside her, Michael stared silently at the floor, his hands clenched, his thoughts distant. "I don't know how much more I can take," Julia whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of exhaustion. "I pray every night just for something to change." Michael reached over and took her hand gently. "We have to keep hoping," he said, though even he didn't fully believe the words. For Emma, in the corner of the nursery, Rex's ears perked up. Something was stirring, and what happened next would change their lives forever. But before we get there, let's go back to the beginning. Emma had entered the world as a picture of perfect health. From the moment Julia held her in her arms for the first time, she felt a sense of completeness she never thought possible. Her daughter's bright blue eyes were full of curiosity, and her tiny fingers would wrap tightly around Julia's thumb like they never wanted to let go. Michael would come home from long days at the construction site just to watch Emma kick her feet with joy on the living room rug. She was their miracle, their light. But everything changed just after her 3-month checkup. It started with subtle things that only a mother might notice. Julia saw that Emma wasn't kicking her legs as much during diaper changes. At first, she chalked it up to a growth spurt or maybe fatigue. Babies have slow days, too, she told herself. But those slow days didn't go away. Instead, they turned into stillness. Then came the doctor visits, the waiting rooms, the tests, more tests. Julia remembered gripping Michael's hand as they sat across from a neurologist, waiting for answers they weren't sure they wanted to hear. The words came like thunder. Rare neuromuscular condition, likely permanent, no known cause, no definitive treatment. Julia's world shrank in that moment. She couldn't hear anything else. the doctor said. All she could see was Emma lying quietly on the table, her tiny feet unmoving. The diagnosis didn't just affect Emma. It reshaped every corner of Julia and Michael's lives. Their home, once filled with laughter, baby giggles, and late-night lullabies, had grown quiet. The kind of quiet that felt heavy, suffocating. Each room echoed with reminders of what used to be. Tiny socks untouched in drawers, toys that hadn't been played with in weeks, a nursery chair that now rocked empty. Julia tried to keep things together. As a first-grade teacher, she had always been the calm in the storm, the one others leaned on. But at home that strength began to crack. Mornings were the hardest. She'd wake up hoping it had all been a bad dream. But then she'd glance into the crib, and the silence would return. Emma would be there, eyes open, body still. Michael, who had always been the steady one, buried himself in work, pouring concrete, inspecting steel, anything to keep his mind off the ache he carried. But even on the job site, when he thought no one was looking, his eyes would cloud over, lost in thoughts of his daughter. They both did their best to stay strong for Emma. Therapy sessions, specialist appointments, endless online research, anything that could provide a sliver of hope. But the emotional toll was undeniable. Late at night, they'd sit together in silence. Sometimes they'd whisper about the dreams they used to have, watching Emma take her first steps, running through the backyard, laughing in the sun. Now, even those dreams felt like too much to hope for. And slowly, almost without realizing it, the space between them grew. Not because they loved each other less, but because their pain had become too heavy to carry. Together, in their quietest moments, a single question haunted them both. How do you keep going when your heart breaks a little more each day? It was Julia's sister, Megan, who first suggested getting a dog. You need something different in that house, she had said one afternoon, her voice gentle but firm, something that brings new energy, maybe even a little hope. First, Julia resisted the idea. A dog? What difference could a dog possibly make? Their days were already packed with medical appointments, physical therapy, and endless uncertainty. Adding a puppy to the mix felt like inviting more chaos into a life already on the edge. But Megan didn't give up. One weekend, she showed up at their doorstep with a 3-month-old German Shepherd puppy, wrapped in a flannel blanket. His ears were too big for his head, and his paws looked oversized, awkward, and endearing, all at once. His name was Rex. Julia stared at him, unsure. Michael didn't say much either, just knelt down and let the puppy sniff his hand, but it was Emma who Rex went to first. He padded over to the crib without hesitation, stood on his hind legs, and rested his chin gently on the edge. His dark, intelligent eyes locked on the still form inside. For a moment, no one spoke. He likes her, Megan said softly. From that moment, something shifted. Rex wasn't like most puppies. He didn't bounce off the walls or tear through ooze. Instead, he was calm, watchful, almost intentional. Every day he would sit by Emma's crib, sometimes for hours, his head resting near the bars as if he understood exactly where he was needed most. Julia didn't understand it at first. She'd often glance over and see Rex there, still as stone, just watching Emma breathe. It wasn't much, but in a house filled with sorrow, his quiet presence was the first flicker of peace they had felt in a long time. From the very beginning, there was something different about Rex's connection to Emma. Most puppies his age were wild, with energy, chasing shadows, chewing furniture, getting into every corner of the house. But Rex, he had one focus: Emma. Each morning, as soon as Julia opened the nursery door, Rex would trot in and head straight to the crib. He'd sit quietly, his body curled into a patient little ball, ears perked, eyes fixed on the still baby girl. At first, Julie and Michael thought it was just curiosity. Maybe Rex was drawn to the sounds or the smell or simply the quiet of the room. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear this was no ordinary attachment. Rex didn't just sit near Emma. He stayed with her. He'd rest his head gently against the crib bars, sometimes nudge her tiny hand with his nose, or let out a low, soft sigh when she stirred. It was as though he was trying to comfort her in the only way he knew how, by simply being there. What struck Julia the most was how Rex seemed to sense the unspoken emotions in the house. On especially hard days when the tears came easier and words felt too heavy, Rex would quietly press his body against her leg, his eyes calm and understanding. No barking, no jumping, just presence, just peace. Michael, too, began to notice. He's not just watching her, he said one evening standing in the doorway of the nursery. He's protecting her. That simple observation stayed with Julia. It wasn't just comfort Rex was offering. It was loyalty, a silent promise. He couldn't move mountains or heal nerves or undo diagnosis, but he could love. And in that room, in that moment, love was more powerful than anything else. It was a Thursday night, quiet like so many others before it. The house was still. The wind outside brushed gently against the windows, and the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Julia sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, the baby monitor resting in her lap. Michael was beside her, flipping through a folder of therapy notes he wasn't really reading. Their routine had become clockwork. Emma's medicine at 6 o'clock, therapy stretches at 7, silent prayers at 9 o'clock. But tonight, something felt different. Rex had been pacing since dinner. Not frantic, but alert, focused. He'd walk to the nursery door, sit for a moment, then walk back into the living room, tail low, ears perked. Julia noticed it first. He's acting strange, she said, watching him curiously. Do you think something's wrong? Michael shrugged, but his eyes followed the puppy. I've never seen him like this before. Then Rex did something they hadn't seen him do before. He scratched gently at the nursery door, let out a soft, urgent whine, then turned to look at them. Direct, intense. Without a word, Julia stood and followed him. As she stepped into the nursery, the room was just as she had left it. Emma lay quietly in her crib, her face peaceful. Rex padded in behind her and moved straight to the crib, placing his paws up on the edge, nose gently nudging the bars. And then it happened. Julia blinked, unsure at first, but there it was. Emma's tiny fingers twitching just a little. Then, again, a slow, subtle curl of her hand. Michael, she gasped, her voice trembling. Come here. Look, she's moving. For a moment, he didn't respond, as if afraid that rushing in would break the fragile moment. But then, he dropped everything and ran. Michael rushed in, eyes wide with disbelief. And as they stood there, hearts pounding, Emma's leg moved just once, but it moved, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the days that followed, everything changed. What once had been a still, silent routine transformed into moments of quiet awe and cautious hope. The morning after Emma's fingers twitched, Julia found herself staring at her daughter, searching for signs. Any signs that it hadn't just been a dream. She didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, as she gently wiped Emma's face with a warm cloth, the baby's hand moved again, this time with intention. Her fingers curled around Julia's thumb, not just in reflex, but in grasp. Tears welled up in Julia's eyes. It was real. From there, the small miracles began to build. One by one, Emma's movements were subtle at first. A flicker of toes, a soft stretch of her foot. But over time, they grew stronger. She began to wiggle her legs slightly during diaper changes, reach for her soft pink blanket, and respond to sounds with little jerks of movement. Even the physical therapist was stunned. "I don't understand it," she said during one session, watching as Emma lifted her arm an inch off the mat. "This kind of progress usually takes months, sometimes years, but she's responding like her body's waking up." And through it all, Rex remained a steady presence. He sat quietly during every session, his watchful eyes never leaving Emma. Whenever she grew tired or frustrated, Rex would inch closer, lay his head near her tiny feet, and simply stay. That was all he needed to do. Julia and Michael began to believe. Again, not just in medicine or therapy, but in something deeper, something that couldn't be explained by science alone. Emma's recovery wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. And every movement, every twitch, every smile was a reminder that the impossible might not be so impossible after all. With every small victory Emma achieved, something else began to heal. Something that had been quietly breaking between Julia and Michael. In the early days after the diagnosis, their conversations had become brief, functional, and tinged with sadness. They'd gone from dreaming about Emma's future to simply surviving, day by day. But now, something was shifting. There were more smiles, more eye contact, even laughter. Soft and uncertain at first, like they were remembering how it felt. One evening, as Julia watched Emma grasp at her favorite plush bunny, Michael leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed, a quiet grin on his face. "She's coming back to us," he said softly. Julia turned, her eyes filled with tears. "No, we're coming back to her." Their home, once filled with silence and tension, had started to come alive again. Julia found herself humming while folding baby clothes. Michael would pause in the middle of a work call just to peek into the nursery. Emma's babbling filled the air, blending with the jingling of Rex's collar as he followed her every movement like a devoted shadow. Rex had become more than just Emma's companion. He was the thread weaving the family back together. His steady presence had brought peace when nothing else could. He had been there in the darkest hours, and now he remained just as loyal in the light. Julia often found herself watching Rex, marveling at How this once awkward little puppy had somehow known exactly where he was needed most. It wasn't just Emma's body that was healing. It was their hearts, their marriage, their home. And through it all, they began to understand something simple yet profound. Love, quiet, patient, unconditional, could mend more than they ever thought possible. Months had passed since that unforgettable night. Emma now sat up on her own, her legs kicking with excitement whenever Rex entered the room. Her laughter, once a distant memory, now echoed through the house like music. As Julia and Michael sat on the couch one evening, watching their daughter crawl toward Rex, their hearts felt full in a way they hadn't in a long time. The road behind them had been painful, uncertain, and full of moments when giving up felt easier than holding. But now, in the soft glow of their living room, hope no longer felt like a distant dream. It felt real. We still don't have all the answers, Julia said quietly, her eyes on Emma. But we know this love brought us back. Michael nodded. Rex gave us what we'd lost. Reason to believe again. Their story wasn't one of quick solutions or miraculous cures. It was a story of presence, of patience, of a puppy's unwavering loyalty and a family's refusal to give up. Rex didn't heal Emma with magic, but he showed them that healing begins with connection, sometimes in the simplest of ways. For anyone facing what feels impossible, let this be a reminder. Miracles don't always come with flashing lights. Sometimes they come on four paws with quiet eyes and a heart full of love. Hold on. Keep believing, because sometimes the smallest love can spark the biggest change.